And I don't care what nobody's saying, I know Elvis. You know, there are a lot of rumors.
James Brown, the godfather of soul, spoke about Elvis Presley after his death in a revealing interview. What nobody expected to hear was that James Brown and Elvis Presley were good friends.
Well, soul has no color, it has no barrier. But I also had a lot of good people that brought out a lot. I want to pay a tribute to a good friend of mine, Brother Elvis Presley, who opened up a lot of doors for me to get through.
James Brown and Elvis first met in July 1966 in Los Angeles. Presley's friend and DJ, George Klein, had first met James when he appeared on his Memphis-based show called Talent Party. James appeared several times on the show in the mid-1960s, and they became friends. So when James was in Los Angeles attending Jackie Wilson's show, George introduced them. Quote, "I told Elvis, James was just a few tables away," recalled George Klein. But knowing how all eyes in the room, including some press eyes, were watching Elvis, and knowing how the press sometimes made a big deal of the hierarchy of stars, I wondered if he wanted to take his seat and have me bring James over to him. "No," said Elvis. "Take me over to James." From that night on, they were fast friends, unquote.
Elvis was a pioneer, and he came out 1 year before I did. He was out in 55, Heartbreak Hotel. And then I come in 56. And Elvis and I were very good friends up until the last minute of his bodily life. But he'll always live because of the fact he was such a beautiful man.
George Klein described in his memoir, Elvis, My Best Man, how James Brown visited Elvis at Graceland several times over the next few years. Quote, "Over the next couple of years, James did get to spend quite a bit of time at Graceland. Sometimes if he was in town, he'd just cold call and try to catch Elvis. And I was lucky enough to be there a few times when James and Elvis spent the night singing gospel songs together," unquote.
And I don't care what nobody's saying, I know Elvis. You know, there are a lot of rumors. Elvis and I used to sing spiritual together. And he'd buy any movie that I'd make, any film, he'd buy the film and close the theater up and show it.
Not only did Elvis and James sing spirituals together at Graceland, but also in Las Vegas in Presley's penthouse suite at the International Hotel, now called the Westgate. James Brown's money man and best friend, Fred Davis, described the night Elvis and James had an informal gospel concert in Presley's Las Vegas suite.
But we went down to the suite, and Elvis met us out in the hall as we were getting off the elevator, and I went upstairs to the suite. He was a floor above us, and but they were laughing and talking, and we went inside and had some sandwiches and coffee, and the next thing they got to singing bars of gospel music, and they were teasing each other. Elvis would say, "James, I bet you don't know so-and-so and so-and-so." He'd say, "Oh, man," yeah, and he'd sing a few bars, and James Brown would do the same thing to him. "You don't know so-and-so." And Elvis said he went to church and he knew them all. He said, "Well, I go to church too." He said, "I know more than you do." And they were teasing back and forth about who knew all the gospel songs. And they went back and forth. It was like a little tit-for-tat battle, like two little kids, you know. And James Brown loved Elvis, and Elvis loved James Brown. Anyway, they put on a mini concert there. James Brown sat out on the piano stool with him, and they sang gospel music for about 2 hours.
Here's a fun fact. What is one wardrobe item that Elvis and James Brown had in common? They both wore capes during their concerts. James Brown's use of a cape in his concerts became one of the most legendary trademarks of his performances. The act began as a theatrical device to heighten drama. James Brown first started using a cape during his performance on The Tammy Show in 1964. At the end of an intense song, Brown would collapse from exhaustion by kneeling on the floor, and a member of his entourage would rush out to drape a cape over his shoulders. Just as he seemed finished, Brown would spring back to life, throw off the cape, and continue performing with renewed energy. This ritual gave fans a powerful emotional experience, cementing the cape as part of his Godfather of Soul persona. 7 years later, in 1971, Elvis started wearing capes with his famous bejeweled jumpsuits. The capes were initially intended to add flair and drama to his live performances. Elvis was inspired by superhero imagery, particularly figures like Captain Marvel Jr., a comic book character he admired in his youth. By adopting capes, he could project a larger-than-life presence on stage, embodying the role of a modern-day superhero of rock and roll. The dramatic flourish of spreading or discarding a cape added to the spectacle of his shows, aligning with Presley's reputation as a dynamic entertainer. Ultimately, the cape symbolized Elvis's evolution into a showman who transcended traditional rock style. When Elvis died in August 1977, James Brown came to Graceland to pay his respects to Elvis. Presley's body was brought to the mansion for a private viewing for family and friends. A public viewing for the thousands of fans who gathered outside the mansion was also held earlier that day for 3.5 hours. George Klein explained, quote, "One of the first phone calls I remember receiving after Elvis's death came from James Brown. Wanted to tell me how broken up he was over the news. He asked if he could come to the house during the private viewing. I remember being taken aback by how truly distraught James was. I walked him over to the casket, where we both just stood silently. Then he sat quiet and motionless in the corner of the living room for a long while before joining the rest of the mourners in the den," unquote. In his autobiography, Brown wrote about Elvis, quote, "His death hit me very hard. When he died, I said, 'That's my friend, I have to go.'"
I love Elvis for being a man. I love him for what he done for the people and the chance he gave me. He kept me from being number one. I was number one soul and he was number one world, and it took a long time, but it's almost like the two rental cars. It made me try harder, and I love Elvis for it, and we'll always pray for Elvis.
In 1978, a year after Elvis died, James Brown recorded his own version of "Love Me Tender" as a tribute to Elvis. It was released as the B-side on the single for his song, "The Spank." At the beginning of the song, Brown said a few words about his friend, expressing his love for brother Elvis Presley, calling him the king of rock and roll. To listen to Brown's soulful version of Presley's famous song, "Love Me Tender," see the link in the description below. James Brown wasn't the only black celebrity that praised Elvis. Those who falsely accuse Elvis in the present day for stealing songs from the black community aren't aware of the many black artists of the time who respected Elvis and were friends with him, including Muhammad Ali, Jackie Wilson, B.B. King, Cissy Houston, and more. Watch this video next to see and hear when Muhammad Ali called Elvis the greatest. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like this video to help this channel grow. For more fascinating facts about Elvis, pick up one of Trina Young's 4 Elvis books. Read a free excerpt at elvisbiography.net. Please subscribe to this channel and ring the bell for notifications of future videos, and keep watching more Elvis videos here.